Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Night had fallen on JFK Airport. The runway lights blinked in the darkness, barely illuminating the plane waiting for its passengers. Inside, the atmosphere was hushed, a murmur of conversations, the rustling of newspapers, and the clinking of seatbelts. Among the travelers, a man sat upright, his posture inspiring both respect and calm. James Carter was no ordinary passenger. A New York City police officer for over 10 years, he had faced extreme situations, witnessed violence and hatred, yet always maintained an unwavering dignity. Tonight, he was exhausted after a tense intervention in the Bronx, but he knew he had to remain vigilant, even while traveling. His civilian uniform was understated, but his badge, visible through his shirt, silently reminded everyone of his authority. A few rows away, Angela Whitman, a blonde flight attendant with hard eyes, was preparing for her shift. She had always possessed this mixture of arrogance and excessive rigidity, and tonight she wasted no time in displaying it. Her gaze lingered on James with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. In her mind, he was just another passenger, and the fact that he was black seemed to trigger an immediate judgment in her. When James politely asked for a glass of water, Angela offered a cold, almost contemptuous smile. "We have VIP passengers to serve first," she replied, making no attempt to soften her curt tone. The cabin, full of travelers, seemed to hold its breath. James felt the weight of her dismissive gaze, but he remained motionless, his patience defying time. In the narrow aisles of the plane, every move Angela made seemed calculated to assert her superiority. Little did she know that this flight would be the scene of a lesson she would remember for the rest of her life. James, silent but attentive, noticed every word, every sigh, every ironic smile. He knew that sometimes, justice wasn't found only in the streets, but also in how we choose to react to humiliation. As the plane gained altitude, the contrast between the two became more pronounced. On one side, a man respected for his courage and integrity, on the other, a flight attendant who underestimated the power of her words. This routine flight was about to transform into a subtle confrontation, where dignity, racism, and regret would clash in a confined space, under the silent gaze of the stars. The plane had barely left the ground when the atmosphere in the cabin already seemed thick with tension. James Carter adjusted his seatbelt, took out his phone to check some urgent messages from his unit, and settled into his window seat. He was used to flying, but tonight, something in the air felt off. Angela Whitman, the flight attendant in charge of his row, was walking down the aisle with her cart, distributing drinks and snacks. Her eyes landed on James, and a cold smile stretched across her lips. She parked the cart a few feet away and said, loud enough for some passengers to hear, "Sir, could you please wait like everyone else? We serve VIP passengers first." James slowly raised his eyes, surprised by the curt, condescending tone. He replied calmly, but firmly, "I have no problem waiting, madam. But a glass of water, when you have a moment, would be appreciated." Angela raised her eyebrows and chuckled softly. "Oh, of course. I suppose you're used to being served quickly." Her remark implied more than just service, an open judgment on her skin color. James took a deep breath, knowing that reacting angrily would only make things worse. He chose to remain calm. His eyes, however, never left Angela. He observed her every gesture, every forced smile. He knew she underestimated his patience, and he mentally prepared himself for what might come next. As the flight attendant moved to another row, a murmur arose among the passengers. Some shook their heads at Angela's condescension, others simply avoided looking. James sensed a mixture of embarrassment and silent solidarity emanating from the cabin. A few minutes later, a child accidentally spilled their juice on the next seat. Angela sighed loudly, looking at James as if it were his fault. "See? Everything goes wrong when..." She trailed off, realizing she'd just crossed the line. James simply smiled politely, masking the irritation she was trying to provoke. At that precise moment, James understood that this flight was not just a physical journey, it was a test of patience, dignity, and self-control. And he was ready to pass it, no matter what. A few hours after takeoff, the cabin became agitated. An elderly passenger appeared to be suffering from dizziness and shortness of breath. James Carter, true to his police instincts, immediately stood up. He calmly approached, assessed the situation, and asked the passenger, "Sir, can you breathe? Do you need water?" As James began to help the man, Angela Whitman drove past him with her trolley, and a wry smile crossed her lips. In a voice loud enough for several passengers to hear, she murmured, "Honestly, what could a simple black police officer possibly know about that?" The cabin fell silent. Some passengers exchanged shocked glances, and several shook their heads discreetly. James's cheeks flushed, but he didn't lose his composure. He replied calmly, almost softly, "I'm not here to convince you, madam. I'm here to help someone who needs it." Angela rolled her eyes, clearly irritated by his calm response. She continued serving the rest of the cabin, but her sarcastic murmurs still echoed in James's mind. Every forced smile she gave the other passengers now seemed deliberately designed to belittle him. A passenger, who witnessed the scene, dared to speak up. "Excuse me, madam. I believe the man is doing his job perfectly well." Angela looked at him with disdain and turned her head away, aware that her words were starting to backfire. The tension rose, and the rest of the cabin silently observed the exchange. James, however, simply remained focused on the sick passenger, showing everyone that his dignity did not depend on Angela's opinion. At the end of the incident, as the man felt better and settled back down, James slowly sat down again. Angela, at that moment, felt an unusual discomfort. The passengers' stares, filled with admiration for James and disapproval for her, were beginning to weigh heavily on her. A shiver of regret ran down her spine, but she tried to mask it behind a cold smile. This seemingly ordinary theft had transformed into a scene of silent confrontation, patience and professionalism against racism and condescension. And Angela Whitman would soon discover that actions have consequences, sometimes faster than one might imagine. The plane began its descent into New York. The city lights twinkled below them, but inside the cabin, a heavy atmosphere hung over Angela Whitman. Every time she passed James, she noticed his unwavering calm and the quiet respect the other passengers showed him. A shiver of unease began to run through her, her actions were about to be noticed. The captain, visibly attentive to the situation, approached James as soon as the plane was stabilized for landing. "Mr. Carter," he said with a genuine smile, "thank you for your help. You handled this incident wonderfully." Angela, who was watching the scene, felt her stomach clench. The captain signaled to the cabin crew to officially congratulate James. For the first time, Angela realized that her behavior hadn't gone unnoticed. James's professionalism and composure had made her the weakest link in the scene. A few minutes later, as the passengers were heading towards the exit, the captain approached her and said in a firm but polite tone, "Ms. Whitman, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me for a flight report. Your behavior towards a passenger has been noted." Angela's cheeks flushed red. She tried to protest, but no excuse seemed sufficient. She followed the captain, realizing with horror that this theft, which she had considered trivial, would change her career and professional image. In the narrow corridor leading to the landing zone, James met her gaze. He said nothing, but his expression was neither anger nor vengeance. She saw only undiminished dignity, and that simple look was more humiliating than any reprimand. Angela then understood that her actions, motivated by prejudice, had not only ridiculed her in front of a passenger, but also in front of the entire company and staff. For the first time, she felt the weight of shame and the power of regret, a feeling she had never known before. A few days after the flight, Angela Whitman was summoned by the airline's management for a formal meeting. The atmosphere in the meeting room was icy. The director, surrounded by several executives, calmly placed a file on the table. "Ms. Whitman," he began firmly, "your behavior on board Flight 482 was reported by several passengers and by our captain. Your actions were perceived as discriminatory and contrary to our values." Angela felt her heart pounding. Memories of James's calm gaze, his professionalism, and the murmurs of the passengers flooded back to her. She lowered her eyes, unable to bear the tension in the room. James, invited to attend the meeting to provide factual testimony, spoke calmly and with dignity. "I am not here to harm you, Ms. Whitman. But I wish you to understand the impact of your words and actions. This flight could have been an ordinary experience for anyone, but your behavior turned it into a humiliation." Angela felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but no words came. James's calm and composure highlighted the weakness of his own actions. The director continued. "As a result, you will be suspended for 2 weeks and will be required to attend mandatory diversity and non-discrimination training." Angela nodded, shame and regret burning in her chest. She understood that she had gravely failed in her responsibilities, not only as a professional, but as a human being. As the meeting was ending, James stood up, placed his badge on the table, and simply said, "Ms. Whitman, I leave you to reflect on your actions. True dignity does not come from the power to judge, but from the respect one shows to others." Angela left the room with a mixture of humiliation and lucidity. For the first time, she understood that racism and condescension left deep scars, and that the only way to redeem one's mistakes was to acknowledge one's faults and learn from them. This theft, which seemed ordinary, had left an indelible lesson: dignity and respect are always more powerful than prejudice and arrogance.